G'day legends, so we're still going through the fallout of UFC 310 and I want to continue here with talking about the aura-deflating fight that was Shavkat Rakhmonov's victory over Garry. Brand new news has come out that Shavkat Rakhmonov might have actually been injured throughout that fight. So let's break down that news, talk about that, and also talk about this future matchup with Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Belal Muhammad later next year and which way I think that fight would go. Because when you look at this fight, Shavkat Rakhmonov was coming into this Garry fight on Tapology with 83% predicting him to win. And after seeing what we saw, I don't know if he's going to beat Belal Muhammad at all. I think his chances of beating Belal Muhammad have dwindled almost down to 0%. I would say less than 10% against Belal Muhammad. Now, firstly, this news of Shavkat Rakhmonov's MCL tear. It comes in from DC at the end of the pay-per-view broadcast. So unfortunately, I can't play the footage, fair use and all that. The UFC do not care about that. They own their footage with an iron bloody grip, mate. But DC said, I learned that Shavkat fought with an injury. He tore his MCL going into that fight with a torn ligament. You're not going to look like the killer you looked like in fights prior. Now, my first thoughts on this, I'm not going to lie, I do smell the susness in the air. Purely because when fighters have injuries, usually we get some x-rays or something, we get some actual evidence of this. Like very, very recently, this week, hours ago in fact, we got x-ray footage of Cyril Gane's foot and how badly he had destroyed it in that fight against Alexander Volkov, that Alexander Volkov won, by the way. Should be Volkov versus Tom Aspinall next. If we can have Khalil Roundtree versus Alex Pereira, let's just have Volkov versus Tom Aspinall. We have proven in the UFC that the actual rankings don't mean anything. Now, but either way, right? When we're talking about Shavkat Rakhmonov here, if some x-ray footage actually comes out or some scans come out of Shavkat's knee, I'm going to take everything I say back. But when it comes to this news, the fact that it's just DC throwing it out there at the end of the pay-per-view, I'm going to be taking this heavily salted. And I'll tell you why. Number one, DC might not know he's doing anything wrong, right? But someone from Shavkat's team could have just told DC in passing. This could be gamesmanship from Team Shavkat, right? And DC has sort of just run with it without verifying the news in any way. We are talking about the co-main event and the post-pay-per-view wrap-up. We are essentially talking about 40 minutes between the fight happening and DC saying this. There is no way to verify this news. Benefit of the doubt, perhaps DC was just doing his job, reporting what he heard, right? Or possibility number two, DC could be incredibly biased as well. Look, DC is a massive fan of team wrestling. When it comes to the meta of MMA, DC's primary job is to make sure that wrestling stays up there. And let's face it, Shavkat's performance wasn't very inspiring at all. So this could be DC personally running defense for Shavkat as well. Maybe hearing a Chinese whisper somewhere, picking up that Shavkat might have been injured, and then just happy to inflate it and talk about it on the broadcast. And this stuff happens, And then number three, let's face the facts. UFC is a dodgy organization. They tend to prop up the superstars as much as they can, and Shavkat Rakhmonov is a big future superstar for that region. And that victory against Garry, Shavkat kind of looked a bit flat, didn't they? Did someone in the broadcast booth, did Hunter Campbell or Dana White simply whisper something in DC's ears before him, John Anik, and Joe Rogan went to do their post-pay-per-view wrap-up, maybe suggesting that DC hint something towards Shavkat being injured, maybe start running defense for the UFC and their big up-and-coming stars. This is something that the UFC would do. They do implement any tactic they can to make sure the fights go in the direction that they want them to go. I get it. It would be very weird for Team Shavkat to lie after a win, but let's face it, Shavkat has finished absolutely everybody. And when you look at this fight, especially on Tapology, he was meant to win by a very, very large margin, and he didn't. So it does leave door open for a little bit of excuse making. You know what I mean? Because the Shavkat fans, they're a little bit let down after a performance like that. You know what I mean? To say, well, I wasn't 100% going into this fight, leaves a lot of room there for the Shavkat fans to still cling on to something. I'm not saying Shavkat's lying. I'm just saying that we don't have any evidence to support this, and it goes a long way to help Shavkat's case going forward against Belal Muhammad. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I just plain don't like it when fighters just make excuses like this. Like, if Ian Garry would have had slightly better jiu-jitsu, and he had sunk in that choke, would we be blaming the loss? Would we be blaming the loss that Shavkat would have sustained on his MCL injury getting him down? I know this is all like hypothetical, and if my auntie had a set of balls, she would be my uncle, and sometimes you just got to live in the world that you live in. You know what I mean? Like, Ian lost. If you lost, you lost. That's all that matters, and a loss on the record would have happened. Again, Cyril Gane lost to Volkov, but on paper it says he won, so now we all know Cyril Gane's going to get that shot against Tom Aspinall. You got to live in the world that you're in. I'm just saying, if Ian had won, are we going to be blaming the loss to Shavkat on the torn ACL being part of Ian being able to have so much success on the ground? Probably. And then, of course, there is what's happening with Team Shavkat. Yeah, now we've got two fairly lackluster performances. Maybe lackluster isn't the right way to say this, but we've got two performances that have not been the way that they were meant to go, right? We've got him against Ian Garry and him against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and he's blamed them both on an injury. It wasn't that Stephen Thompson's takedown defense is that good, or maybe Shavkat's takedowns aren't as good as everyone thinks they are. It's no, it's not that. It's the fact that there was an injury on both of those fights. And if that is true, and if you were injured on both of these fights, at what point do we, the fans, get to start having the conversation that maybe you are not a healthy enough athlete to compete at a high enough level? Uninjured, I mean here, right? Like the amount of time between the Wonderboy fight and the Ian Garry fight was 12 months. And you're coming off an injury and then coming into this one with another injury, and you're not even an active fighter. Now, we, the fans, are putting money down, gambling our hard-earned to see who is going to win the next fight. And we're talking with each other to try and help each other with our bets. And maybe the conversation of, Shavkat is just not a very high-level athlete when it comes to his body being able to sustain a training camp. If you have been injured in the last two fights, maybe we're allowed to start having that conversation that you're just not a very, very high-level athlete. Could be that, or it could be maybe the world, we all just thought you were better than you actually are. It's easy when you're coming up the rankings to make people outside of the top 20 in the rankings look easy. But now you start to get in there with some of the highest skilled athletes in the world, and it doesn't start to look so easy. So now you're getting into the Wonderboys, Ian Garry sphere of competition, and all of a sudden things become even more challenging. And now it's not because I'm not brilliant, it's because I was injured, mate. And then to step up even a level further and get in there against Belal Muhammad, who has been, let's face it, dominant. The fans have a legitimate reason to not love Belal Muhammad. He's not devastating. He's not ending anybody. He seems to have pillow fists. Even if he soaked his fists in petrol for a month, it doesn't seem like Belal Muhammad is finishing anybody. You know what I mean? But Shavkat Rakhmonov pushing Belal Muhammad up against the cage for 25 minutes, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen when you look at Belal fight. Belal's the one that knows how to use his short height to get in underneath and start laying some really good pressure with his boxing. Not painful, but knows how to land the pressure with his boxing. Belal is the kind of short, stocky wrestler, almost like the way Volkanovski can maraud forward, where he can get the hands around the hips of the tall, lanky guy and get him off balance and slam him to the ground, and then start laying down that not savage ground and pound, but definitely accumulating enough points to win the fight. I guess the one saving grace here, if you are Team Shavkat Rakhmonov, is that, again, let us pretend and say that he is saying the truth, right? He's got no reason to protect his ego, and it just is what it is. He's been injured in his last two fights. But let's pretend that he has been injured in his last two fights, and then he goes into that fight against Belal Muhammad 100% healed up. If Shavkat has worked his way all the way to a title shot, carrying injuries, imagine what he would be able to do to Belal Muhammad if he is 100% healthy. Anyone on Team Shavkat can at least cling to that hope. When people are like, I don't know, Belal seems like he'll be able to handle Shavkat's pressure. You guys can always cling to the fact that, hey, Shavkat was injured in all those fights. He's going to be going into this one healthy, or at least you hope that he would be going into this one healthy. However, considering that Belal Muhammad is the kind of guy that wants to get in there as quickly as possible because of his age, and Shavkat does struggle to remain healthy even with a 12-month break between fights, we'll just have to wait and see how he feels going into the next Belal Muhammad fight. Let me know down there in the comments. Do you believe that Shavkat Rakhmonov was actually injured in his fight against Garry? Knowing that, how do you think he is going to go against Belal Muhammad in the future? Who do you have winning that fight? Put that down there in the comments. If this is your first time here, g'day, my name is Dougie. I make an MMA video every day of the week, and I go live about 3 times a week as well. So if you want to be part of all that, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell button if you know when I want to go live. And if you boys are enjoying the channel, thank you so much. I'd leave a like for you, but there's no button to like the comment. Actually, there is. That's why I comment back on all of your comments, boys. So leave a like, help grow the channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.